and welcome to another episode of the Team USA 40K podcast. This is our return from Heroes Cup. I am joined today not by Anthony Vanilla, but instead by my teammates from Team USA that went to the Heroes Cup with me. Heroes Cup is a tournament, a 5-player team event run in Phoenix, Arizona by the wonderful Green Banner, great event organizers. And so I'm going to have each of my teammates from that event join me and talk about our results. I guess this is a little bit of a spoiler, but we won the event. Team USA got first place. Woohoo! And so Team USA got first place at the inaugural team event of the edition. Technically, it happened at the same time as another team event, but you know what? Same weekend, so it counts. And so I'm going to have each of my teammates join me one at a time to kind of talk through their findings of the edition. We're in a brand new world. We've got this brand new edition. We're at tournaments that are now being run with a different format from what we have seen in the past. And so this is a really different thing. And I really wanted to go to a team's event and go to Heroes Cup specifically for two reasons. One, Green Banner's awesome. They're a sponsor of Team USA. They support us. It only feels right that I support them back. Two, this shit's crazy. The new edition is weird, wild, and wacky. And I actually, obviously, I'm kind of, getting ready for the WTC in August, but I really wanted to do a teams event that was relatively low stakes so that I could understand what was happening. I really just didn't want my first teams event of the edition to be at the WTC. That is what I thought would potentially just lead me to not understanding or missing some fundamental aspect of 11th edition because so much has actually changed. So I'm gonna have my teammates on and join me, and I'm actually gonna start off with the one and only wonderful Tyler Bortel, who is a coach for Team USA this year. Tyler, welcome aboard.
Howdy, John. Pleasure to be here. How you doing tonight?
I am fantastic. At the moment, we're getting ready for a Team USA practice weekend, which we'll be flying out to soon. We've got that brutally quick turnaround where I think we both landed Monday morning, or did you get in before midnight on Sunday?
Local time. I got back into my bed at 2:30 a.m. Work at
Okay,
8:30.
nice. I hit my bed at 9 a.m. on Monday,
Jesus.
which was rough. And we're flying to Team USA practice weekend about, I think my flight takes off about 72 hours after the last one landed. So that's 2 days of work, a podcast, and a game night with my wife. It's enough time for the bare essentials.
Absolutely. Nothing more important.
All right. So at Heroes Cup, you were playing Tau for us. I know a lot of people looked at the end of 10th edition into the beginning of 11th edition and said, "Hey, Tau's still good." What happened there? Why
Yeah,
Tau?
as it turns out, I've been playing Tau. Honestly, I've been playing Tau since the very, very beginning. This is a little known fact about myself as a supposed Bugs main, but Tau were actually my first army back in 2011? Question mark? Right around the advent of 6th edition? Yeah. So I've been playing this since I was, basically in diapers. But I took quite a long hiatus and was excited to come back for a teams based reason. I was playing a lot of Tau in GW format teams events on the tail end of 10th edition because a couple of good friends of mine, Kit Smith Hannah from Team USA and Michael Heiner, who's been a recent addition to the advisory squad of Team USA, put together this awesome Storm Surge list, and the Storm Surge has my heart. So Tau happened to be in a really great spot. I worked them up a whole bunch. And as we switched over to 11th, while I was very excited about and continue to be very excited about Bugs in 11th, man, oh man, does the call of the Riptide beckon. And I chose to answer it this time around. It is a high octane, very exciting army that does a whole lot of damage and gets you to lunch a little bit quicker. And who doesn't like that?
Me. I hate lunch breaks. I like playing for as much time as possible. Playing into lunch often, actually. Although I did my best this weekend to avoid that. So you were playing Tau for us, and you were often a defender. This is very much a holdover from 10th edition, where it's take the gun army and defend with it. But now that we have this new event companion and all this other stuff, it's a little bit of a different dynamic to what it was in 10th. What kind of style of Tau did you bring, and how did it work within the 11th edition framework?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm playing Mont Ka Tau over here. Modka being the go fast, eat ass version of Tau, as opposed to the more cagey Cao Yan or the more tricksy Ret Cadre. The plan is relatively straightforward. Stand approximately 2.01 inches away from the opponent and apply gun to the affected area. So, with that in mind, defending has a huge upside in that not only do I get to pick my table, pick a nice light board where not too many places exist to hide, but also I get to pick my deployment zone. And ooh, baby, does a gun army like to pick its deployment zone? I think there's a couple different ways that you can rock this depending on how you're prepared for. But me personally, I am a search and destroy enthusiast with my Tau. I want to be on top of my opponent while my expansion is so far away from them that they're never, ever, ever getting there. And as a result, going Purge the Foe Ka worked out really well because against four of the dispositions, everything but Recon, so against Take and Hold, against Pryos, against the Purge Mirror, and against Disruption, you got to pick Purge the Foe, you got to pick Search and Destroy, Table Quarters, and then apply a crazy amount of pressure really early on, especially if you're fortunate enough to go first. So that was kind of the mindset, big picture, and how the list was going to come together. You can read about the specifics, but we're still playing a Storm Surge, we're still playing Riptides, we're still playing the Twin Lance, all that aggressive kind of balled up into one to just run out and absolutely table someone before they have any chance to do all of this nonsense, button pushing 11th edition shenaniganery, right? None of this hidden being far away from me. We're just going to get in and put bullets in heads and get out.
So I was honestly, when you like first pitched this to me when we were kind of like coming up with the team, I was kind of expecting you to like want to play Dawn of War and play this like really like wide game where you could either like push one side hard and then like look down the terrain kind of sideways, or where you could just your opponent didn't have a lot of room to get away from you and like get out of range. But search and destroy was kind of what you were wanting to be choosing with your Tau here.
Yeah, 100%. The way that I play Tau in particular, I often describe it as world leaders with guns, because a lot of what I learned in how to take table space, I learned from Anthony Vanella, who I'm sure if you're listening to this show, you know who that man is. And he talks a lot about holding space as opposed to about holding objectives and making trades, right? I want my entire army to move as a wrecking ball, going from one place to another, executing everything around there, crushing one flank, and then moving over to the other. If you try to do that on Dawn of War, I've found so far that people can often see that, stretch the table, flip things into hammer and anvil, and start benefiting from hidden while racking up some points. And I just don't have time for that, right? By contrast, in Search, you are on top of your opponent immediately, and they're going to have a much harder time getting all the way around backside of you to flip your or home field, as long as you're built for it. We've seen a lot of 11th edition things where it is just so damn easy to flip home fields. But as long as you tech against that reality, as you taking your opponent's home and your opponent not taking yours tends to be a recipe for success, especially when you have the firepower to back it up.
Yeah, with I mean these fast armies like you have, they certainly are able to. What's funny is that I haven't played a lot of Purge the Fire. I haven't played as it. It's actually the disposition that I've played the least number of games with. I think I've only gotten like two in.
Mhm.
Um, is there a lot of incentive to get the home field specifically, or is it just minimize the number of objectives that your opponent can actually hold?
Yeah, I think it's just against priority assets that you want to take your opponent's home field to actually score points. That might actually be backwards even. It might be that it is Prio's job to do it to us. So not necessarily a ton of literally stand on their home field to score points, but a whole lot of get to where they are and make the fighting happen there, as opposed to letting the fighting happen out and about, right? If we're fighting on my opponent's expansion objective, they're holding it every turn, they're scoring points, I'm trying to push them off of it. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. If we're fighting on their home field, well, they're never touching anything outside their expansion, and there's not a single army in the game that doesn't need to hold any objectives against Purge the Foe or to score points. So that was kind of the mentality there, was just take the fight to them and don't let them ever stretch things out or cordon off a safe zone.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. So then I guess my next question is going to be, how did it work? Like how did it do for you? You obviously, as a team we were successful, but were there any moments where that kind of an approach didn't work? Was it successful all the time? What were kind of the factors that played into that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple different ways that you as an opponent can try to mitigate this strategy, right? A couple of them come to mind pretty early. Um, excuse me. The first one is, and the one that like, warms my heart as a rat enthusiast is, man, I just want to play a bunch of little guys who are going to run around, and it's okay if you want to come kill some of my stuff because it's also cheap and so fast, and we're just going to go stand in the places and push the buttons, and we were going to get like a, you might win, but you're getting like an 11, and that's great for me. That strategy generally worked terribly. I played against Craftworld Eldar are trying to do that with Windrider. I played against Drukari trying to do that, and man, the primaries with Purge the Foe just don't facilitate that if you're willing to, kind of put your balls on the table and play really aggressive into it, right? The reconnaissance primary is the biggest one that comes to mind, where they're trying to do actions on objectives and you're trying to kill stuff and stand on objectives afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't let them take objectives other than their expansion, they won't score points, and they don't have an option but to put stuff on objectives, at which point you get to score points, right? In that Drukari game, I went second, which, boo, bummer. But he had to come out and play the game, do secondaries, try to set up some move blocks, try to get involved. He probably could have held back a little bit more than he did, but he tried to play in what seemed like a pretty normal way if you weren't familiar with exactly how the primary works. But as a result, I killed 3 different units and then ended the turn with the units that killed them standing on 3 different objectives. And the way that mission works, I just score 30 primary turn 1 for doing that. That's nonsense, man.
This is consecrate.
Consecrate versus triangulate, I think is the one.
Yeah.
Right. That's just, I score 30, which means if I hold my expansion on turns 2, 3, 4, 5, it's 4 points a turn. That's 42 primary. Forget about ever
46, right? 46.
Sorry, that's 46 primary. That's 45. That's max primary. Forget about the hold more that objective that mission has. Forget about any of that nonsense. Like you just max. You just do. And meanwhile, the opponent has to come out, get onto objectives, take them away from you, and then hit buttons. And that just didn't work. I saw this in the Eldar game as well, up against Windrider. Man, Windrider is an army that a lot of people seem very excited about that I just do not get the sauce out of. I talked with fellow Team USA member Ruben Zhao, who is a bigger name in the field, who really, really loves Windrider. And man, as soon as you know what that army is doing, it just doesn't have of the juice to get through some of these higher damage, higher durability, toughness skews, right? And a lot of the missions that kind of army wants to play, a lot of the disruption stuff in particular, disruption into purge has to run in, take the middle, and hit a button. And my God, if you just park your whole freaking army on that center objective because you know that your opponent can't do the kind of damage to face check you, or God forbid, if they try to face check you and fail, that they then get tabled, right? They're never going to hit the button, man. And as a result, the rat primaries, the recon, and the disruption, they just don't have the juice into purge that I really think that they were trying to have. So that strategy didn't work so well. Okay. The second major strategy that you might consider is try to at a run and gun and risk it all and make it a coin flip. Well, being an all scout army, I'm not really in a ton of danger against turn ones, having a lot of infiltrate. So that ends up being kind of sketchy. And then the third one you might try is, well, what if I can actually tank it, right? And frankly, that was the only one that worked. I had a game that I ended up losing 12-8 into Necrons. They had Catan, they had Doomsday Arcs, they had the Silent King, and while I was able to work through all of those pieces by playing back and playing cagey and actually playing thick secondaries, which I thought was a crazy idea at the time, he was able to leverage a couple of opportunities and flip some things over once I was kind of running out of steam there. So I think if you want to play against Tau, you need to be able to demand some respect out of them in a way that DDAs, a Nightbringer, and a Silent King can. And you need to be able to tussle with them and take a bit of a punch in a way that something like Wraiths can. So I thought that was a pretty well-equipped army to deal with what I brought to bear. But a lot of the kitschier stuff, I don't think it does it as well as people think it does.
Yeah, and a large part of this was that you played the same role in our pairing cycle every single time, right? You were our second defender in all 5 of our rounds, and this was a specific change to 11th edition, is that because you were a defender, when it got to the time where you got to the table with your opponent, you were the defender. And so that normal thing where, right, most people saw cause like, yeah, it sucks if you lose both the coin flips. You get to infiltrate first and you get to go first. That's bad. But if I get to infiltrate first, I trade 5 scouts for the surety that your Storm Surge won't scout move into my deployment zone. And if I go
Mm-hmm.
first, then it doesn't matter. So I just need to win one of these 2 roll-offs. But one of
Mm-hmm.
those roll-offs immediately went away, which probably lessened a lot the viability of that second plan that you outlined because you
Yeah.
had the first infiltrate.
I will say the first infiltrate thing, I keep going back and forth on it, man. At first, I was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. This is what I've always wanted to just, 50-50 that I get to get what used to be the 1 and 4. But nowadays, because of that 9-inch coherency rule, that your units got to be packed pretty darn close together, the ability for an army to screen out basically the whole middle with one unit is really down the drain.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, they pick one flank to infiltrate on. I pick the other, and I always get the better one now. But I'm gonna get one of the flanks. What I will say though, and this is like a slightly more niche interaction that I just kept seeing play out, is that a big thing that you want units to do if you want to play against something like Tau is have your cheap trash units stand on the outside of the little 2.5-inch wide plates or whatever they are, right? So that I can't come in, tag those plates, see through them, and hit you while you're trying to stage in your own damn deployment zone. But on several of the search maps, one of those two little L-shaped plates is outside the DZ. So you need to infiltrate like 2 inches up in order to stand on it to prevent me from seeing your whole army. And if I get to put my Pathfinders 8 inches off the line, so you don't get to deploy on that teeny little strip, man, like you just lost basically half your DZ of available hiding spots. And it's not always worthwhile because, a squad of Pathfinders is still a good thing to have. Maybe I want it for later, but that's always being an option to me that at worst I can coin flip how, excuse me, how a game is going to be played. It's a horrifying thing to plan for. And if you're building a team, man, you better have a plan for it.
Yeah, very nice. So across your games, I know you had some good scores. One close loss against the Necrons, but it sounds like the Purge the Foe plan in general was quite good for scoring. I know a lot of people went into the weekend thinking, "Oh, Purge the Foe is the best one." There's been a lot of internet hyperbole about it. Uh, any thoughts on the disposition or any other lessons from 11th?
Yeah, totally. Disposition wise, I've been kind of on that, that meme with the bell curve, right? Where on the front end, you're like, you look at Purge and you're like, oh my gosh, it just plays Warhammer and scores so many points. And then, that's kind of the monkey brain version. And then the middle version, when you're, digging around and you're seeing how everything interplays and you're trying a couple games, you're like, damn, every time I play Purge, I win, but I get like a 12. Man, I just can't push diff because my opponent has such easy access to stuff. And I feel like I have come down the other side of the bell curve and am this, enlightened blue skinned monk over here saying, guys, we were right all along. Just fucking kill them. It totally does work and it totally does push diff. It's just that your plan to push diff has to be pretty specific to what your opponent is trying to do. If you want to push disposition, you need an army that can stand on that center objective and not give it up easily for them to flip things over to you. God, the Twin Lance. Oh, so good for that. To say, hey, if you want to come stand on the center objective and push a button, you're taking a battle shock, motherfucker. And
Oh
good
yeah.
luck passing that. Or also 6-inch mega heroics now, right? That 2 CP. Oh, the twins are going to be in combat with you, punching you annoyingly hard, and then moving 10 inches past you if you're not dead yet to be in your home field next turn. Like, if you build these kinds of things into your lists, which as it turns out are the kind of things that I was already kind of planning to play, but as if you build in strategy for the specific missions, God, this army can push diff, and the disposition is not holding it back in the slightest. So that's kind of where I'm at with Purge right now. It does do the thing. Maybe there's another hump, and someone's going to figure out something that I haven't seen yet about how some kind of OC bomb or shutdown situation is able to actually tamp it down, but I haven't found it yet, and I've been looking pretty hard.
Okay. All right, awesome. Thank you. Last question then. Any other observations about 11th? Any new aspects to the edition that were either more or less significant than you thought? Anything else that someone would want to hear about before their first either singles or teams event of 11th?
Yeah, man. I alluded to it earlier when I was talking about how easy it is to flip home fields these days. Screening is hard. Screening is by far my favorite skill to like both practice and also to see executed on a table. There's something so satisfying about out double checking that all your measurements are in the right places and looking to your opponent and being like, "Would you like to rapid ingress?" When there's nowhere viable for them to appear because you've set all your stuff up just right. And man, oh man, is that more difficult in 11th between the 9-inch coherency and the 8-inch arrivals, right? It's just a little bit sketchier. So, with that in mind, build a plan for how you're going to keep your house safe if you're worried about that happening, right? 12-inch no deep strike is a huge buff. If you're playing Tau, I think you should be playing Dark Strider right now. If you're playing GSC, I think you should really be playing a Clamovis. No one in Necrons is talking about the Geomancer, but man, I think that guy slams, right? The ability to say this section of the table is mine, you don't get to come over here, and if you try to drop in with reserves, I've got infantry with go to ground, so I'm hidden outside of 12 and you can't come in within 12 to shoot me, so it's going to take you minimum 2 turns to get there, right? Like, plan and like holding your backfield used to be a thing that happened automatically because you brought 5 idiots, and now it's a thing that you need a plan for. But once you have that plan and can like delegate that, the rest of your game's going to go a whole lot better. So be ready for that. That's my last tip of 11th for y'all.
All right, thank you very much, Tyler. You're making me feel a little bit bad about not having any infiltrators in my Space Marine list, but yeah, we made it work. All right, well, thank you very much for joining, Tyler. Thank you for playing at Heroes Cup with me, and congratulations on our win. Heyo! All
Hell yeah.
right,
Thanks for having me, John. Take care.
bye bye. So next up, I'm going to have the one and only Ben Jurek on, and Ben was our Chaos Space Marine pilot, running a good old fashioned pact bound zealot, which he's been having a lot of tournament success with recently. Ben, welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me, John. Glad to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you. You were running pact bound zealots, which definitionally meant that you had to be playing priority assets.
Yeah, I was playing one of the 3DP detachments. I've been playing around with a bunch of other CSM stuff, but we kind of ended up on me needing to be prio. So in this situation, this was a choose disposition first and then army second, and I had a variety of choices across my book, but I had these freshly painted Chaos Space Marines, and I definitely wanted to bring those.
Yeah, awesome. I was really excited for that. I know that that's an army you've been working hard at. It was also fun to see them in person. Those models are looking great. And so, Ben, your role with the team for I would say 4 of the 5 rounds. Round 5 is a little bit of an exception because our opponent offered us a challenge. But your role was mostly to first defend, take something kind of problematic for the rest of the team, and then roll with it. You were running. Well, actually, how about you tell us what you're running?
I'm running your classic PBZ, but in the last few weeks, we with the 11th edition launch, it lost about 200 points and stuff if you're taking near the exact same list. The cool thing about this about it is that a lot of stuff is just as good as it was. If you pay attention, like my Colorado list or my Dallas list I had success with before, it still is like the core of like Abaddon and crabs and shooting platforms and Bastor. And then on top of that, we also brought the Huron brick and like a little bit of trash to like move stuff around. We played with like having demons trash, but then we decided we're going to bring demons as an army, so we'd cut from that. So I ended up being in a very flexible space in my list, and we designed something we thought would work with Prio. However, I totally went into this event with 0 reps on Prio, but a bunch of reps on Space Marines because I've been playing a bunch of like experimental stuff with like with Fellhammer being out there and like some Purge the Foe builds, and we decided that Tau Purge the Foe was a little bit better in this situation, so we swung it back, and then I ended up on Prio. And in like previous discussions, we were like, well, what if we just kill people? What if the mission doesn't matter? And I unfortunately found out that the mission does matter.
I love that we're getting different kind of lessons from each army. It's nice to hear that not everyone can play Purge the Foe, but I know that it was quite the break from where Pac Banzo was maybe a month or two ago.
Yeah, I think there's a version of this list that does quite a bit better. But building tall when the mission demands that you push, 2, 3, 4 buttons a turn in some cases. Oh man, it felt really bad to draw cleanse in the Prio mirror when I'm supposed to be sabotaging those objectives at well. So I only had 4 pieces of trash in my army, and that got exposed pretty quickly, especially into other tall lists like Scintillating Legion.
Yeah, and this was I think almost certainly just an unfortunate reality of the timing of this. So for Heroes Cup, our lists were due the Thursday before the tournament, which I will say is much closer to the event than I would normally expect at an event. But that was only 8 days after the Munitorm Field Manual updated. And so once that Munitorm Field Manual updated and we start getting points, and we're like, oh, it looks like those two crabs went up like 100, what, like 170, 160, 180 points. I think it's 160. I think two crabs went up 160 for you or something. Maybe no. CSM crabs might have even been more. The point is a ludicrous and a deserved amount of points is how much they went up, and so we didn't have a ton of time to adjust, and we were kind of still figuring out our dispositions and everything at the same time. So we definitely were kind of like taking shots at this early event.
Yeah, and I definitely didn't, mind those learnings. And I will admit that some of this was just pure hubris, where I was just like, prio, it'll be fine, everything's gonna be fine, and it was fine in a lot of cases where I didn't get exposed. Um, so some of the learnings we ran into, as me being first defender, is that I went out with a losing record. That's not something I get to say too often. I went 2-3 personally at this event, and I had the team covering my butt in a lot of cases. But this is a team event. There's a lot of things that we set up specifically down the line where we were looking at our first offered attackers. And we went, wow, we really can't let our demons and GSC play these things. We really can't attack into any of this. Or is this something that Tyler can't play? Or are there two things that Tyler can't play? So in much of the case, once we kind of felt it out and discovered that I was not really like a hero defender that was going to be getting a lot of points no matter what I chose. I was a defender that was going to clear the way. We executed that plan, and it's a role I'm used to on most teams I play on. I've played with Team USA at Pyro Cup and a few other events. I'd play Team Art of War at a few events across the country, and I am often a first defender. And it takes a different kind of psyche to first defend, because you have to be okay with eating the stuff nobody wants and having a rough time.
Yeah, and as always, beyond something as simple as the record, I always have to give my praise that you are my absolute favorite wet blanket to throw on the other team because you do it with a smile, and it is really valuable to say like, not every not every defender gets to be a hero defender. Not every defender gets to be selfish and just say, oh, this is the one that is better. There were definitely situations where Ben was offered two armies, and it was something that he would have scored more points into, and something that was really scary for the rest of us. And like Scintillating Legion, where I didn't really want to put our Tau into Scintillating Legion. I didn't want to put our Gene Circle into Scintillating Legion. I didn't really want to put our demons into Scintillating Legion. And you know what? I didn't really want to play against it either, to be honest. And so it's really nice just saying, Ben, take my problems away, please. And watching you do it with style.
Yeah, and we were kind of feeling out like what this CSM list would be doing in the first defender, and what prio, like what this disposition does as a defender, because that's something we discovered was what dispositions defend well, what maps are available to them, what makes their mission easier to play. That's something that we're discovering in teams play, and it's a very new thing in 11th edition. And I've quickly discovered that I was like, okay, I need to be a little bit more conservative with what I was doing, because even in like the games I was winning, I had like my army through my opponent's like skull on his home, like killed 700-800 points of his army on my go turn, and he still scores a 7, and I'm like, that's not a thing that would ever happen in 10th. That'd be a 20-0. So I found it also relatively difficult to push with this disposition as well.
Yeah, I think that's a kind of a shared experience where in order to take your opponent's score to an actual zero, you have to be really focused and aggressive about how you kill them. I think it's also very disposition based because like what each army has to do depends on the disposition it's playing against. And so I certainly noticed that like when I'm playing take and hold, I stop my opponent from scoring by getting their like by actually killing their ability to take and hold, right? The way that I adjust my opponent's scoring is to kill everything that is trying to hold objectives and to blow them off of every objective. That usually people have to do more objective holding when they play against take and hold. But then prio is like kind of the do a little bit of everything. It's do an action, do a kill, do a hold. And so you
Yeah,
have to stop their ability to do everything.
And in the mirror, it's do a bunch of actions, which I got put in the mirror more than a couple times. I learned that especially with my list, not built for it. I hated it. So I definitely ran into like a situation where it's like if I had understood prio a bit differently, it definitely would have built my list quite a bit differently to play into that mission, but still do what I was doing. I'd still have crabs and be doing damage and doing everything else. But like if in hindsight, if I like make like 200 points and changes in my list, I probably do quite a bit better just with that, just with those learnings there. And that's, we're taking home a lot of really valuable lessons. And John, we were able to invite my wife out to come coach for us, and not a single person on their score projections was accurate within 5 points the majority of the time. Not a single person. And a lot of that came down to, if, end of turn scoring, holding on to cards. I've seen more 30-point turn fives in this edition and this where we're at right now than you could ever. Well, it was nearly impossible, like, beforehand. 10 points in secondaries, 15 in primary. I've seen more like 25, 30-point turns on bottom of fives in this, and that is just so warping and so difficult to predict as well, because you have no idea that it's coming.
Yeah, it is a very difficult thing, unfortunately. And it's the way that these cards stack. It's the way that these primaries score. I, similar to you, definitely had some issues giving accurate predictions, which is unfortunate because I would have said that I was fairly good at it by the end of 10th edition. I often leaned a little conservative, but I was always pretty accurate. When I said a game was going up, it was going up. And I don't think I've overshot a prediction in quite a while. And yet in 11th edition, that has absolutely happened to be as well, kind of what you're describing. I think the learning curve on this for Teams event is going to be quite steep for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a whole new skill to learn, and something that's a bit of a crapshoot, because there's so much that there's a bit of agency that's outside the player's hand. It at the beginning of the event, I was able to, into like my more stable conservative matchups, I was able to be pretty accurate with my predictions. My score predictions are usually within 1 or 2 diff, if not on. And I was like, okay, that's pretty good. But then like toward the end, any game that got like a little bit of volatility in it, you just really didn't have a good grasp on it sometimes. And we had that across the board, where like some players are like projecting a 3, a 6, and they come back with a 13 or higher. Like we saw that happen. A lot of people that were like, oh yeah, I'm only going to get 15 here. Oh oops, I scored 20 some points bottom of 5. It gets it to 20. It's a it gets a little bit out of hand, and that's going to be, especially with the margin of error, that draw window being a bit smaller now. That's going to be difference making. People are going to draw games, lose games, or win games on the back of this.
Mhm. Yeah, the speaking of the draw margin, this is where, of course, we're referencing that in order to win a round in a 5-player team event, instead of needing to score 56 points or 55 points was the usual benchmark in 10th edition, you'd have to score 53, which I gotta say feels pretty impactful because I think we had our round 2, I think we only scored 54, which was conveniently enough for the win, but in 10th edition would have held up as a draw.
Yeah, we that was into our sister team of the Old Glory Team USA. In round 2, we had our nice little civil war.
Yeah. That was very, very good fun. And I was happy to come up on the north side of that civil war. But it was definitely you could feel how tight the rounds were and how swingy the ends of each game were. For every game that ended up being a lower win than we expected, as we saw these late game swings happen of, oh well, I still had 3 units left, so I scored 26 points on bottom of 5. We also had some losses come back better than expected by the exact same margin, where people were predicting some pretty rough spots of like, yeah, I think my opponent's going to score 100 points. I can't stop them. Oh, okay, so I ended up scoring 91 points, so it's 11-9. It's like, oh,
11-9, yeah.
like
Yeah, like,
what are we doing here?
yeah, and that's just not a thing you saw in the previous edition, and it's taking a while to get used to. Like we even saw 100-100 draw in our GSC mirror the last round. So there's going to be a lot of wacky things you're going to see, and there's going to be a lot of wacky experiences going on in 11th edition. And I'm so glad I got to learn a lot of this early, because
Yeah.
it's because if I learned this later, I would feel unprepared for anything going forward. This is it's been a ton of fun though. It's and I particularly like the mixing the dispositions and having everybody mix and match. I think that's a cool place to be. I think there's a lot of excitement, and I'm just while we took home the W, and I did my job. It's if I would like to do better.
Always. That is always the chase. So before I let you go for the night and move on to our next teammate here, do you have any insights on Chaos Space Marines after the event? And do you have any insight on one thing from 11th edition that either took you by surprise or was more or less relevant than you expected? Something that someone would want to know about before their own first tournament of 11th.
I think Chaos Space Marines are the most flexible, powerful army in going into 11th edition. I think outside like other Space Marine armies with the Loyalists, that you can literally pick a dispo and build around it, and most likely do just fine. They're going. I think they are a top pick for take and hold. I think they're a top pick for purge the foe. I think they're a top pick for reconnaissance. Like you can pick a dispo, build around it. They have great data sheets. They play the game well. A lot of their detachments see quite a few buffs here, and a lot of stuff that you weren't really paying attention to before. A lot of like units that were kind of sitting in the back of the book are coming forward, and even like their allies. That a little beast of Nurgle to scout on the middle, and and be a little lone out bastard. Like there's so much good stuff to be played in CSM that can play any of those missions. I would have a hard time arguing that you should not ever bring CSM on a 5 or an 8-man team. So if you're a fan of CSM, go for it. Crabs are still good, and if they nerf crabs in a few weeks, I promise you the army is still very playable. Um, as far as things that caught me by surprise in 11th, we kind of touched on it a little bit, but it's really just the scoring. The scoring is insane. I cannot believe how easy it is for some dispositions and some lists to be almost completely uninteractable, or just like not really be killing you, but still just be scoring, because they have a job. It's an asymmetrical setup, and if you don't table them and they're just looking at their end of turn scoring, they're still going to score 70, 80, 90 points. Like I I was bewildered when someone scored 21 points at top one on me. I was like, how am I going to beat this? I'm supposed to keep her points down.
I definitely had the same feeling. I played against a disruption player at one point, and I think they scored like 13 or 15 primary on top of one, and I was like, what? They just like pointed a bunch of buttons and actions and just said, yeah, I'm going to do 3 actions. I'm going to get to 15 points right now. I was like, huh, I really didn't think that's how that was going to go. I was like, oh, you're scoring way more points than I expected. And same thing, these points can like either be, it can be like a dry as a desert or it can be a waterfall, it feels.
Yeah, and hopefully you're on the waterfall side of it, but that's the part that just like really caught me with my pants down on this edition.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. All right, awesome. Well, thank you very much, Ben. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I really appreciate it. So next up, we are going to move on to John Garza, a member of Team USA, one of our advisors who is on the team playing demons.
Thank you for having me, John.
Hello. So welcome aboard. And you were playing Slanesh demons for us. You were running the Legion of Excess build, something we thought was pretty interesting. And you were running it specifically as reconnaissance.
Yes, I was running it as reconnaissance. I, allied in Warp Tide to get that battle line detachment, to sort of fill a role in the team. I thankfully, from your side, you let me have that. I had started out as take and hold and guard and was not really finding my stride with an army. So I went back to my first love, which was, Slanesh demons. Mono melee is apparently supposed to be dead this edition. I was hoping to prove it wrong.
Yeah, well, you had quite a solid run for it. I was honestly quite impressed with the Legion of Excess. With this new edition, there's always this like these there's tons of ideas running around, right? There's a lot of like, oh, is this thing good now? This was bad before, and I think all of us struggle a little bit with this thought as we are going from edition to edition. Of we acknowledge that things could be different, but until we see otherwise, we kind of assume it's the same. And I'm not going to lie to you, John. I thought Pure Slanesh Demons, was not good at the end of 10th edition. And I'm willing to let people try things. But I was a little curious how it was gonna go. I was like, "Oh, this would be really cool if John's right." But I don't know if I'm willing to bet money on it until afterwards. So I was actually kind of impressed with how it did.
I think that's a pretty fair take, to be honest. Slanesh Demons had their time in the sun back when they came out in Grotmus and took those series of hits. I will say that a few of the new sort of mechanics inside of 11th, like the hidden rule, pretty much is what made it seem viable to me, like stacking those -1 to hit and -1 ballistic skill modifiers with cover to sort of hide your demons and prepare for like that all-in push on like turns 3 and 4. Uh, really sort of spoke to me as like possible that maybe this could be like a decent avenue for scoring some points, and it had enough speed to maybe be in the correct places for reconnaissance, where I found like speed seems to be king if you're trying to play that disposition, right? You have to be
Mhm.
able to get to the places.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean the Celestial Humans certainly were fast, and reconnaissance is one of those missions where it is very unconventional. So the role that we normally used you in was as an attacker. We were trying to feed an all combat, hidden, janky scoring army, just like into like shooting armies or things that we didn't think could fully handle it. And so we often kind of used you as a pair with Floof, our Gene Circle pilot, in that role. How did that role suit you? How did that feel for you?
So that role really fit me quite well. I think the beautiful part about Slanesh Demons sort of trailing off at the end of 10th is people forgot how they play and how they sort of operate. And then when you're offered, Slanesh Demons versus Floof on GSC, you're normally going to pick the Slanesh Demons, right? You really don't want to go into the faction expert, first 11th edition tournament. um, I found that most of my opponents, right, when we sat down the table and we started like getting the train set up, they were not only trying to like parse what their new mission was based on like the disposition, they're trying to figure out which of the three maps played into this army that they haven't seen in like over a year at this point. And then like, oh yeah, what does this do? Like, what does the mask do? What does the changeling do? You mean on a 6-up, if I put my storm surge on your home base, I might not get to shoot and lose the game? Right? Like it put a lot of doubt and sort of uncertainty in the matchups that I feel like for people who picked me, specifically like the Purge the Foe players that I ended up into, I had Mont Ka one round and two, you know, Chaos Space Marines who were expected to bring back diff, right? I heard their captains talking to them. All of a sudden, that sort of like doubt sort of tilted the matchup in a way that I sort of benefited from, right? Because I
Mhm.
didn't exactly remember how it worked.
Yeah, it's a really spooky thing. I quite enjoyed getting to watch it in action, and you put up some very good results over the weekend as well. I was quite impressed with how you did attacking a bunch of the theoretically new bullies on the block. Right, I think that on day one, if I'm recalling correctly, I put you into Firestorm Space Marines, which is like the new Space Marine that's rising up to challenge Ultramarines with like adding a Librarius or Fulgaris to all these flamers and getting to do all this cool stuff. And then I think I put you into Montka, and then I put you into a CSM list with I think one or two crabs in like a Veterans Long War or something. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, no, that you pretty much nailed it. Yes, that was exactly it. It was the murder talon with a crab,
Yeah.
singular crab, which I'm thankful for.
Fair enough, fair enough. But we put you into armies that theoretically had a lot of damage, and yet you were able to swim upstream through that and score a lot of points with reconnaissance.
Oh yeah, and a lot of that was due to and I will admit this freely, the purge versus reconnaissance matchup spread being that consecrate versus triangulation, right? It
Mhm.
really put the onus on them to push forward and table me, kind of like Tyler said, right? You kind of have to put your balls on the table and kill me in my deployment zone. In
Yeah, of
which,
course.
if I have Slanesh Demons, if you miss that shot, right? If a 4-up comes up a little bit extra, or if that changeling goes off, you do just sort of explode. Um, and a lot of my opponents I simply didn't move from my deployment zone the first turn because I can't do the action, right? I can't score points on my first turn. So I'm not going to let you score anything without taking a larger risk. So I hit everything. I sat on my literal back line of the map and waited for them to come to me that first turn because they started to feel the pressure. They started to push out a little too aggressively. And I found that even though they had the damage, because they had to compromise position to get it in the right spots, I was able to sort of flood one side and do the whole washing machine trick, right? Where we split it in half and I get to overload that with my rapid ingresses and then do the triangulation on 2, 3, and 4, as long as I just don't lose anything on turn 1. Don't interact.
Yeah, and then with triangulation, I think versus consecration, obviously we heard Tyler's take on it. It is one of those things where once you score points, they're good for the rest of the game, and so keeping your opponent off of it for a couple of turns and then getting it for a couple of turns is a really big snowball in both directions, actually.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Uh, I definitely heard, and I took this advice from Tyler. Right? Oh, he let me kill 3 things turn 1. I consecrate all 3 objectives, and then I didn't have to worry about my points the rest of the game. I was like, all right, so I need to not die. Right? That is step 1, turn 1. We sit behind our lines. We make sure that if we're going to score points, we're trading it for that action for our own, because dead models do score points in triangulation. That's the only rule.
I usually like it when they don't score points, though.
Yeah, well, that's because you like tably people, John. I liked running around and just pushing buttons.
Yeah, it's funny because like that doesn't sound like that doesn't logically sound like what I would want my Slanesh demons to be doing. But as soon as you said it, it's like, oh, you know what? They're fast on the move characteristic, right? Because I think of my EC, the other Slanesh army, as not being an amazing action army because all of my speed comes from my advance rolls. And then I was like, oh, but Slanesh demons, all the speed is the move characteristic. They don't actually advance and do that much. I know you've got some advance and charge for some battle line, but broadly speaking, you're fast because of the movement characteristics. So that actually makes it easier for you to do actions. Are there any like action enablers in the like can you advance an action battle line or anything with that new detachment?
So unfortunately, Warp Tide doesn't give you advance in action. Um, that would have really made my life much, much simpler.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Uh, but it's also why like the list had a couple of lone ops and then a 3 man of unit of like fiends to sit around. Something that moves 12 does the action, and then I kept 2 beasts of Nurgle inside a deep strike, like small profiles that I could drop in locations that I need them to hit that, and then also get hidden, which was kind of the most important new aspect of 11th for me when it came to scoring points.
What your army of all infantry and beasts without guns? You
I,
used
I
it?
I have 2 guns, mind you.
Oh,
they're
of course.
they are psychic and on the keeper, but yes, no, 100%. I shot them once the entire tournament. Um,
Yeah. Yeah,
but
and obviously the keeper itself isn't going to get the hidden, but it's still kind of tough with that -1 to hit stacking with cover.
oh yeah, absolutely. I found that armies that didn't have an immediate way to ignore modifiers or ignore cover, killing a keeper was a pretty risky proposition, right? And a lot of them found that they did not have what was required. And then the Thieves of Pain strat, which, with the rulings that were given to us, we got to do it after seeing the saves,
Mhm.
really made allocating enough damage to each unit quite difficult to figure out. Because if you kill just enough to pull me back into hidden or out of line of sight, all of a sudden your entire sort of shooting plan falls apart.
You said after the saves is that how Thieves of Pain works now, or it's after you roll the saves?
Uh, So in this event, I spoke to Jason, the head judge, and was asking him how Thieves of Pain would work in this event. Historically, Thieves of Pain back in 10th, you would do it right after the wound roll, right? When it was allocated to a model, and that's when you would Thieves it. But now in 11th, the wounds are allocated in groups first, and then it's the
Oh,
damage step when the models are selected.
so they
Uh,
moved. Okay, so I think I'm getting it now. So it is allocated when it's allocated to a model in the unit is when you get to trigger Thieves of Pain. Previously, you allocated to a model before you rolled the saves. Now you allocate to a model after you fail the saves. And
Correct.
so because the trigger itself has moved, Thieves of Pain has moved without changing any of the wording on Thieves of Pain. That
Correct.
is that is deviously better. Wow.
It is shockingly better, and then it is also very hard for anyone to figure out what all the ramifications are, right? Um, which, fair play. I also have to figure it out live when I'm being shot. Uh, but no, it is a lot better because you know exactly how much damage, how much of that unit you might lose,
Yeah.
and how much of it you can put into your battery and expect not to die.
So
Which is the contorted epitome, of course, combo.
of course. So obviously the contorted epitome, which as I recall, gives a feel no pain to its unit against mortal wounds, therefore allowing it to, thief the pain and then ignore a good quantity of it so that it can keep stealing pain. But theoretically, and let me make sure I got this interaction right. If I shot fiends next to demonettes, no mortal wound, feel no pain here, just 10 demonettes, and you rolled your dice and you rolled the 20 saves I gave you, you could look in at the dice roll of 20 dice and say, yep, I'd like to Thieves of Pain. And you take them as they're allocated. So you take all of the ones and those turn into mortals. And then you take all the twos and those turn into mortals. You take all of the threes and those turn into mortals. And then by the time you've killed the 10 demonettes, then all the saves count. But at that point, you're mostly like fours, fives, and sixes. And so you don't take nearly as much damage because all the passes are what's left in the pool.
Yes, exactly.
Ah!
You sort of cheat the saves step of this as well. Yes, uh, it has
That's
vastly improved.
Yeah, that's crazy. Wow, okay.
Oh yeah, and because it's triggered off every time a model is allocated a wound, you can actually wait till you like say you take the first 4 and then begin Thieves of Pain. So you can really sort of divvy up the damage.
Yeah.
At
Well, that's
least
good
with
to know.
this ruling.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. I mean, I would be anxious to see an FAQ from Games Workshop himself on how this is supposed to work. But certainly, if you go to an event and you ask the judge, that is gospel for the next 2 days, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I used it to survive Montcalm shooting me in the face.
Very powerful. Okay, awesome. All right. So, wow, really interesting. Uh, and now that the event is over and you had your run with the demons, do you have any thoughts on demons as a whole, or specifically Legion of Excess? Now that the event is over.
Yes, I have some bittersweet thoughts after the event is over. While Legion of Excess was a whole lot of fun, very interesting and dynamic to play, and definitely has good matchups, I think you can agree with me the amount that I had to be protected from bad matchups, like kind of far outweighed the benefit, right? Any sort of psychic army that we ran into, or something with the ability to ignore mods, or anything with Oath of Moment, nudge nudge, wink wink,
Hmm. Who could do
kind
that?
yeah, who would do that? Or flamers. Um, really just sort of ruined the game plan of stacking that -1 to really create that survivability. Um, I could Thieves of Pain something and end up losing both units because they could just shoot through everything that I could put forth, right? Um, so with that said, Scintillating Legion just appears better in a team's aspect. So if you're going to run demons or take it away from your CSM, it feels like that's the clear choice as far as which one is the strongest of the demons that I've seen. Though I have heard some talks about some blood crushers or something.
Yeah, I think that demons really have a new lease on life with the new edition, and potentially have several builds. But certainly, one of the members of our sister team on Team USA was also running Scintillating Legion, or was also running demons and was running Scintillating Legion. And I think old Maddie Green also quite enjoyed playing demons in 11th. All right. Final question then. Do you have any thoughts or reflections on how 11th played now that you're done with your first event of the edition? Anything that either was less or more impactful than you were expecting? Anything someone else might want to know before their first tournament?
Sure, absolutely. I would say there are two things that really struck me in 11th as super impactful, specifically for what I was trying to do, which was melee pressure. the new hidden mechanic, and specifically the sort of go to ground like super hidden where you can make it 12 inches, really was worth the effort to set up. Like when I do a charge and I begin to use pile-ins to get myself in position to strike, making sure that my consolidates get me behind hidden or touching terrain or the like super hidden is definitely worth it. Right? A lot of my mental load went into forcing that to sort of control space and bring people to me. So if you're a melee army, I feel like that's worth your time. And then the second thing that really struck me is double ones in charging is a real sad thing that you must count on happening to you at an important time, right?
Yeah.
Like
You
there are,
just
yeah.
have to you like just have to have a CP spare for it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And if you have a stratagem that lets you advance in charge, but it's in that charge phase, there is 1 out of 36 times that that is just not going to work, right? You're going to charge, you're going to fail. Even though you've set up everything the best you possibly could, you're 2 inches away, and that's a real failure point for your army that's going to be relying on making this roll probably 12 times a game, maybe more.
Mm-hmm.
So you can almost expect it to happen. And it definitely happened in one of my games, specifically the 10-10, where I had a keeper 2 inches away that I needed to get into a riptide, uh, roll double ones, auto fails, and I had already used a CP reroll on a different charge earlier in the phase, right?
Oh,
So that's just something that you have to sort of build into your plan and understand is a possibility, and it just adds a volatility that you have to expect in teams if you're going to take like a melee centric army.
yeah. Shooting edition yet again.
I'm sure you're so sad, John.
I like my combat actually. I like melee armies. All right. Thank you very much, John, for the insight and the lessons, and thank you so much for playing the weekend with me. I was very happy to have you by my side, and very impressed with those Slanesh demons. So thank you so much for joining me, John. And then next up, we are going to have Floof Cox joining us with Gene Circle. Welcome aboard, Floof.
Hey, John. It's so great to be here. Thank you for having me, boss.
I know, so great to talk. It's been days, like plural.
I know.
So, Floof, you were playing Gene Circle for us at Heroes Cup. Obviously, we had a successful run of an event, but you had the I would say questionable honor of being our disruption player. The trash detachment that no one else wanted.
Yes, I very funnily got handed the do your best disposition and was told to just go. It has had very normal effects on my mental health, and I've loved having to practice the like 24 games I practice with disruption.
Yeah, it's so fun. Look, disruption builds character. That's what they say, right?
Truly, having to do more to get less points is something that I feel everyone should strive to do in their life.
Yeah. Well, hey, you scored plenty of points. I don't know what you're talking about there, Floof. So, you were running Gene Circle, and you were also specifically doing all new detachments, right?
Yes. So I ran a triple 1-point detachment, which is just to very shortly get into it. Heroes of the Uprising, which benefits all of like our assassin lone op characters. Pure Strain Brood Swarm, which buffs up all of my Pure Strains to be Strength 5, Toughness 5, and gives them uppy downy and all this cool reactive stuff. And then Xenocult Masses, which buffs my favorite unit in the army, the Neophyte Hybrids. They heal more, they get full hit rerolls, they kill you. It's great.
Yeah, very nice. So getting to combo 3 new detachments is kind of interesting. You got to like really play into this new detachment point system.
Mm-hmm.
I think you were the only one of us who did the triple 1 DP. Certainly the majority of lists I saw at the tournament were my detachment from before or my detachment plus 1 little bonus thing.
Yeah. I really kind of got into the weeds of like what makes a detachment in terms of like I'm looking at my old Swarm House list with like Host of Ascension, and it's got like 2 decent enhancements, like 2 to 3 strats I like to use, and like a good army detachment rule, right? But then like if I can find like a quarter of a detachment rule and like 1 to 2 good upgrades and then like 1 to 2 good strats in 3 different things, it's kind of like I'm running away with more stuff than I had before, and that's where like the triple one pointers really kind of caught my eye, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. I've played triple one DPs for a couple of other factions. Obviously not GSC. I'll leave that to the experts. But I played it for certain armies like my Dark Angels and my Emperor's Children, and I very much felt after the games of like this was cool, but I was missing some fundamental aspect of the army.
Yeah.
I think Emperor's Children is probably where I felt that the most. Dark Angels, it like almost worked. Or it felt like close to functional or functional enough. But like Emperor's Children, I was like, yeah, I'm really missing some core aspects here by taking 3 1 DPs.
Yeah, I think, and like, I won't say that the triple one pointer for GSC is without that. A big contrast is taking Xenocult with these other 2 1 pointers versus Final Day, specifically for just a return to reserve strat, right? Because I'm used to when I commit a Neophyte brick, I'm able to pick off a flank, do some damage, and then pop back up and continue that chaos somewhere else. The triple one pointers don't have access to that. So like to me, that's like their one like downside, which is big, especially for an uppy downy army to not have uppy. It's a little rough. But so long as you play with like, this is going to sound weird, but more intent, and you're more than fine like committing that resource when you actually do, and understanding what it might do the next turn and the turn after that, you can kind of get over that hurdle.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you definitely had all the different aspects, right? You had the early pressure, you had the reserve shooting, you had the random janky character
Mhm.
bullshit. It is interesting that most of what Gene Stealer Cult does did feel like it was distilled separately into 3 1 DP detachments, where it's like, like those are kind of like the 3 core pillars of Gene Stealer Cult, honestly, is how it feels.
Yeah, well, see, that was the thing, right? Is that these 3 1 point detachments focus on all the things that like to have the buffs in the army, to where, the characters really like the rerolls for consistency. The neophytes are some of my favorite things, and being able to, spam a keyword and then reroll hits on that helps out their damage. And then whatever the pure strain thing just transforms them into a whole new thing, right? But it's not focusing on bikes, it's not focusing on flacos or stuff that like is good on their own, right? They don't need a detachment, they don't need strats, they don't need rules. They just do their job. And so you are able to focus on all of your rules on these units that are good force multipliers. And that's where I was like, okay, this actually like there's some juice here, right?
Mhm. Yeah, very interesting. So the way that your role kind of fit into the team was you were the disruption player. We usually had Ben and Tyler on defending duties, which means that oftentimes you were kind of being thrown in with Garza and the Celeste Demons, just kind of like into armies to go drag them down to earth.
Yes.
How did that role suit you in the army?
So here's where we kind of get into playing Disruption broke my brain, because I realized that the 40k that I knew in 10th edition doesn't really exist in 11th edition. Playing the like cutesy little I'm gonna deny your primary and teehee, here's 5 guys over here doesn't play all that well, especially when in my testing it seemed like a lot of lists were kind of being warped into this like low unit count to deal with purge kind of army list, right? So I just kind of said, well, if I'm going to be attacking a lot of things, the breakpoint for pure strain seems pretty nice. Neophytes rerolling lethals is just kind of good damage. I think I'm just going to play this as blue purge and just run at people, right? And then if I'm advantaged in terms of the units that I'm bringing, I can play very aggressive and, use my resurgence points to buy back more pure strains, and then, just keep the foot on the gas. But if I'm disadvantaged, now I can use the uppy downy of the pure strain detachment and using resurgence points for like these cheap little 5-mans to like go to actions and all that kind of stuff. And so by using resurgence points, I could kind of like, based on what I attacked, I could change what the detachment and what the army did, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's funny because Ben mentioned that playing Priority Assets CSM, it was almost as if he was trying to play Yellow Purge.
Yeah.
But that, it sounds like, had a little bit less flex in the game plan, where the Priority Assets Pact Round Zealots was really forced into, I'm going to kill you and score afterwards.
Mhm.
And you kind of had a little bit of a flex of, I would like to kill you and score afterwards or as I'm doing it, but maybe I can play a little bit of a rat game if I don't think that's going to work.
Yeah, so that was kind of my thing, is that I really realized that, there's going to be two main armies in the game. It's going to be like these hyper pressure lists that are purge, or they're pretending to be purge, right? Or there's going to be your rat lists. And I kind of realized that a lot of times if you're going straight into just the like pure purge stuff, like Mont Cartel, they look at my list and they go, there's a lot of stuff here. They can probably out rat me. I don't want to deal with this. So a lot of times I kind of ended up going into other rat lists. And that's where like this like modal version of GSC really helped, because then that's when I go, oh, I can be the aggressor here, right? I can be the aggro deck and just run at you, because there's also things like disruption versus recon, in my opinion, is very slanted towards the recon player, and I think the only way to get around that is dead models don't score points, dog. I'm running at you, like I got to figure this out, right? So. Yeah, that's kind of where all of my chips were lying, kind of going into this.
Yeah. The old adage, dead models don't score points, which we've established is not true for reconnaissance versus purge foe, but for everyone else it's true. So, okay, very, very interesting. So, for a first event with 11th, it sounds like you got enough games in advance to skip over the oopsie, I tried a 10th edition plan at 11th, which I know first edition of 11th, a number of people kind of fell into that trap.
Yeah. It's one of those things to where like primary doesn't matter in the way that it used to, right? Like I don't, for most of my dispositions, like matchups, I don't need to hold my home point. It only matters for like hold more. But in those matchups, I can just kind of like maybe set something back there, or if they don't have hold more, I can just kind of go somewhere else, right? With the disruption versus disruption matchup, you're just kind of like making sure that your opponent's not on your home, but you don't actually need to be there. So it's this weird thing to where how you score primary and how much you stop your opponent from scoring primary from taking points is so vastly different that sometimes, depending on the matchup and depending on what dispositions can be, playing this like trading game isn't going to get you as rewarded as maybe just running at your opponent, right? Or fully taking a turn off. It's a weird space, and I haven't fully figured it out, but with about like a dozen and a half games, I was able to be like, there's something different here, and I need to just make a list for whatever the hell is different and hope I'm in the ballpark.
Yeah. How do you think it worked? Now that we've gotten our 5 games and we got the tournament, obviously we won, so good amount of success there. But how do you think the plan worked?
Yeah, so I mean, not to toot my own horn, I think it did work very, very well. With the disruption thing, having this modal thing to where I'm going into matchups that I feel very strong into, like a Green Tide Orcs or Jukari. I can just be like, I can be the aggressor here. I have the volume to just disrespect you. I'm running at you, right? Also with GSC Final Day later on. But into these matchups that are very heavily aggressive towards me and I'm disadvantaged, I was able to be like, okay, I'm playing keep away, teehee, stay away from me. And in all of my games, I did not score lower than 90 points. So I'm either scoring hard and, getting these 17s and 18s, or me and my opponent are both walking up to 90 points. And, I'm looking at the 2 people that I blunted. They were their highest scores for their team. And if I can take that role of, yeah, dog, I got that you totally got these 17s the past 2 rounds. You and I are going to hold hands and we're going to get like a 10 or like an 11-9, something like that. That is a success to me. That is like, what I set out to do with this list was accomplished, and I'm very proud of it for that. There's still definitely some tweaks. I don't think this is a perfect list, but for like week 1, I'm happy.
Okay, awesome. So now that the event is over, do you have any observations on what you want to do next with this circle?
Just like build more. I like this sounds so weird, like it's silly to say, but like it was cool to see how dynamic this army could be while like even fundamentally with how the detachment is set up. It's something that we would never have been able to think of in 10th edition, right? 3 different detachments. But then there are things to where I think all of our single point detachments are very strong and they play well with all of our other detachments, that I think there's a lot of combinations out there that need to be explored, right? Whether it's, Xenocult and Xenocreed, the double Xeno build, or your Tuckeriki, a great member of Art of War and a GSC player I greatly respect, just did very well with Biosynctic Brood Surge and Xenocults, and he's running Take and Hold, right? There's so many different combinations with GSE that I think we still have this great setup that we've had in 9th edition and 10th edition to where our internal balance is super good. And so I'm just of the mode of like, I'm putting on my explorer's hat and I'm going into the jungle, brother. I want to explore. I want to deep dive and figure out all the things. So that's what I'm excited for.
Yeah, I think a lot of armies are sharing this. So I'm glad to hear that you feel Genius Cult is in a similar boat. Do you think you're going to stand disruption or maybe try to break free from the prison?
I think right now I'm going to stay with disruption because I think, and I'm gonna try out the other dispositions because I also, I coach and I run a small little channel, so like it'd be nice to be informed enough on those dispositions to tell people about them. But I think how I see disruption right now is that it's very hard for a lot of armies to play it, but every team needs it. And I almost see it like a soccer team sees a goalie, right? It's not in some games going to be the flashiest role ever, but if you don't have a good goalie, you're gonna lose the game, right? And so if your disruption player can go into, their star hitters and get that 10, get that 11, but also still be able to go into a matchup they're good into and get their 15 or 16 or whatever, I think teams with those kind of anchors are going to be a lot more advantaged going into, into 5s and 8s and stuff like that. So that's where I want to set up and just be a good anchor for whatever team I'm on. And then maybe if we get some balance between dispositions later on, then I'll, spread my wings and explore a bit more.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. All right. Now, regarding 11th edition itself, now that you are done with the first event, you got your practice in, you got to actually, realize it on a tabletop. Is there one or more things that you noticed that were either less or more impactful than you expected, making that jump from 10th to 11th? Was there anything that really stands out to you as, well, something that someone would want to know before they go to their first tournament of 11th edition?
Hidden is insane. I like leading up into this, like I even remember doing like when they were doing the like, here's a faction little preview every day, and here's your 2 detachments, and here's this one that messes with hidden. By like the 10th one, I was like, Mike, stop using the word hidden, please. Let's never use that word again. And I was just so convinced it was going to do nothing, but like melee units that never shoot and always have hidden are super impactful. Rapid ingressing with hidden to like 12.1 away and you're behind a pipe, so you have go to ground or whatever the hell, like that's super impactful. Like this rule can force a lot of interaction that wasn't there beforehand, and I think that's just innately very, very cool. So I think weirdly, the best way to put it is hidden is both underrated and overrated, and it should be explored more, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it certainly does. I very much felt the impact myself in my own games using hidden on, all the Space Marine infantry that I brought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
all right.
Just being able to make like a like durable elite brick, just basically have a loan up by saying, yeah, I'm not going to shoot my bolter. It's like, oh, great. Now I have to get close to you. That's probably going to turn out fine for me. It's great.
Yeah, you're not wrong. The bolt pistols on my melee units have never been this useless.
Exactly.
I'm usually the kind of person that likes to like whip 5 bolt pistol shots at something as I go in, and then chuckle as I do 1 damage to the Avatar of Cain about once per tournament. But yeesh,
It's
those days I think are behind me.
it's very similar to Host of Ascension before it got nerfed, like the second or third time. We had a strat called Return to Shadows, which was when you shot us, any of our infantry units, we could return back into reserves, right? And it was really good for neophyte breaks. It was just basically like, hey, if you shoot this 20 man, I go back into reserves and I reset my detachment buffs. And so I would just go to like World Eaters players and Orc players that I'm shooting against, that I'm playing against. I'm like, you don't have guns, don't shoot me. And it's like that's the same sentiment in 11th of, yeah, man, don't shoot your little pistol, it's not worth it, take the loan up, it's so much stronger.
Yeah, even when I was like pushing units forward and saying like, "Oh, this unit's about to die anyways, I might as well shoot the pistols because it's right in the front of my opponent's army."
Mhm.
Even then, I still found myself after that being like, "Huh, they're shooting me from more than 15 inches away now." Like, sure, they could have easily shot me no matter what, but now they get to back up and shoot
Yeah.
me, or now they get to cross court me, and they don't have to use the guns that are near me to do the job. And I was still noticing, I'm like, wow, I just like really am not going to use the pistols on these things ever.
Yeah, even
Okay.
anything you can force out of your opponent, no matter how minimal it is impact, right? It's still resources. It's board position, it's tempo, it's something that you are making them have to expend, and thusly, like, it's just more value you're getting out of that unit, right?
True indeed. All right. Well, I think that wraps us up. Thank you so much, Floof, for joining us.
Yeah, of course.
And yeah, so I'll go ahead and close out the episode now with my own thoughts on the old Space Marine. So I was, of course, the fifth member of the team, and I was running my Space Marines as a reclamation force. So this is the like Captain Titus Best Day Ever detachment, and I combined it with a Librarius Conclave. So this was fun. I basically was like, I really want to get the Librarius Conclave in, so I'm going to give up all the good Space Marine attachments that I've played before because I really wanted to try something new. And I got to bring in what kind of, after a little bit of thought was the best 2 DP detachment I could add to Space Marines. I don't think Reclamation Force is as good as Blades of Ultramar, but it is noticeably able to be combined with Librarius Conclave. And so I kind of built my list to be a very take all comer, it falls where it falls, and I was our take and hold player. I found that with some practice games that take and hold could set up a very consistent scoring plan, and one that I was quite happy with. And so I was very content to just say, I don't want to be the, the defender that gets to make the choice, kind of that hero defender like we saw with the Tau. And I also don't want to have too much of a pairings preference necessary. We saw that with the Slanesh demons. They needed a little bit of protection against certain aspects. I really wanted to go in with my army and just say, yep, the Space Marine card is here. The Space Marines are going to go do whatever they do. Sure enough, I never defended the Space Marines. I only attacked. I think in 4 of our 5 rounds, I did not first attack. I just second attacked. It was the Space Marines waited to the end and they went where they went. The only exception to this was round 5 when our opponents offered us a deal of mirror matches where we both had a Gene Circle player, we both had a Space Marine player, and we just, traded cards and said, all right, Space Marines play Space Marines, GSC play GSC. Now we have 3 cards left. Let's do 1 defender set, which was very fun. And I enjoyed that. But anytime there was an option, I left the Space Marines towards the end. And this army did a really good job of that. I was very happy with it as just a take and hold scoring machine. Certainly, the staple feature of the army to me was this Captain Titus Blade Guard veteran Wardens of Ultramar abomination, where there are, I believe, 6 distinct wound allocation groups to go through. Of those, 4 of them have invulnerable saves. And so I got to do a lot of alternating of, oh, you point a bunch of, high damage shots at me. All right, I'll first put it on the idiot humans. When they're dead, it'll then go on Sergeant Mataris. And so, 6 las cannons later, you killed the 3 humans because I rolled a 1, 2, and a 3. And then all the 4-ups all hit Mataris. And I was like, oh, well, Mataris passed all his 4-ups because he's holding a Storm Shield. And so it was a very fun, durable, just shockingly durable unit. And I played it really aggressively. I just got to throw that unit on the midfield, never, ever shoot its pistols, and just take advantage of hidden. And what I found was really good with take and hold was to just take a pretty high OC unit and whip it onto the center and just say, yep, this is on the middle now. I have this. And that was something that was surprisingly difficult for a lot of my opponents to deal with. If you put something high OC on the objective with Titus, this detachment combo let me bump my OC. There was a flag in the unit that bumps the OC. So this stupid Titus and Blade Guard unit was like 39 OC if I actually went down the rabbit hole. And so I basically just whipped it onto the center in every single game. And I will say, and this is a surprising thing, in the I guess I played 5 games of Warhammer, so that's 25 battle rounds. I held the middle objective turns 2 through 5, not contested, held the objective. I think in every single game. I don't think there was a single point where my opponent looked at that objective and was able to say, "Not to worry, I have put more OC on it than you." Taken hold, I find it doesn't have there's some, but it doesn't have a ton of split middle, and so I played into a bunch. I played a bunch of Taken Hold mirrors, and I played a bunch of like purge. I think I played one purge of the foe. I think I played one reconnaissance, one disruption, two Taken Holds, and all four of those I would have to check prio again. But all four of those have a single medal, and so I just fastballed Titus and the crew onto the objective. And so that was a really good scoring pattern. It worked really well for me. If people came out, there was an Ultramarine army, waiting behind it, and I would step out and shoot my opponent with Oath of Moment. A big part of that counterpunch was the Librarius Conclave having the Stern Guard veteran unit as one big brick of if you put your tough thing to fight my tough thing, your tough thing is going to eat 20 plus mortals. And that felt distinctly powerful. Just to have this Stern Guard unit with Fusillade for anti-monster vehicle 5+. I can give it sustained hits. I can ignore hit mods. I can give it +1 to hit. It's +1 to wound with oath. It rolls hits against the oath target. It rolls wounds against the oath target because it's Stern Guard. It was crazy. A lot of people got shot by that unit and were like, "Wow, I knew you were good at killing this, but I didn't think that would also kill, a unit of 4 Sekitar robots trivially easily. I didn't even have to roll all the guns. It would kill a Defiler relatively easily if I ever had to do it. It was also shockingly good into just normal things. Like it also just lifted a squad of Custodes because I could. It's only Mortal and Sixes there, but it was very powerful. So I was really happy with this Ultramarine list as just a catch-all waiting at the end, and it scored very well. Some of my games were high differential, some of them were lower differential, but in all of my games I found that the Space Marines could go into anything and score 90 points. I could score 90 to 100 points in every game because Space Marines have enough stuff, have enough CP to do a lot of secondaries. I'm not going to get tabled. I'm very hard to push. I'm going to hold my primary. And so that was a very safe recipe for points, which I distinctly enjoyed. Yeah, it was very interesting to have the army do that. I think Space Marines are uniquely suited to be that flexible option at the end. You can build Space Marines to be a very focused thing, like a Purge the Foe list, like a Forge Father Seeker, an Ironstorm list. But my playstyle, I think, lends itself more to being that flexible. So when we were composing our team, I chose my disposition last. I tried to let my teammates get their choices in so that they could play what they were comfortable with. And then when Taken Hold was the last option left, I then just built a flexible Space Marine list, and I waited at the end of the pairing cycle. And that was distinctly powerful. So I really enjoyed that. I think that the main mechanic that I was abusing was hidden and the size of the objectives. It was very easy to put a lot of the Warden and Blade Guard unit on an objective, have everyone behind terrain, on each side, on each corner of the building. I had a Blade Guard veteran hugging the wall with his arm on one side and the sword on the other to make sure that he had to go to ground. I had a bunch of the Wardens behind the walls, and then I had another Blade Guard on the other side, hugging the wall, doing the same thing. And so it was distinctly easy, I would say, to just get my models on the objective and put the OC on it. And in some practice games, some opponents, fell for the trap of, oh, I'll just try to kill the Titus brick, a thing that is very difficult. My closest game of the weekend was into a fellow member of Team USA, Celesta, and she scored the most points against me without, I think, allocating attack against the Titus brick. Instead, she just was like, "Yep, you were going to hold the middle. I'm going to try to play for both of the expansions at once," and that ended up in actually a relatively close game. We both scored a good number of points there. So yeah, I think at the end of it, what I would say is that I was quite happy with how the army played. I think since I was able to record a lot of content about 11th edition for Art of War, I had a pretty good handle on the edition going in. The things that stood out to me the most was how aggressive I had to be to deny my opponent real points. My first two games went well. I was fairly aggressive, but maybe not maximum, and I was a little bit conservative in my game against Celeste and her sister's battle. And I was afterwards, I was reflecting on it because I didn't score the diff I wanted. I scored a 12 in that game, a good score, but I frankly had wanted more, and I thought that for the amount of influence I was able to exert over the table, I was expecting to score more. And I decided that when Celeste was not taking the bait of jumping on the wardens, I needed to be more aggressive with them and shove them instead of just being content to say, well, I'll just hold the middle for the entire game. And so the last two games of the weekend after we had that break for dinner, I got to reflect over that game and what I thought I did wrong. I just started shoving this big super unit around onto people's objectives. And so for the day two, I was able to say, all right, if you're not going to immediately bite on the warden unit, I'm going to actively be throwing it at other objectives to make it into a problem for you. And that led to some really high differential for me on day two, which I was very pleased with that kind of that in tournament adjustment when I found that I wasn't be able to push diff in one of the games that I wanted to. As and then I guess if I had to pick something that was most impactful or most surprising, I think it really was how aggressive you have to get to push a big differential. Take and hold, I think it's a very natural thing to do because take and hold is all about holding objectives. And therefore, your opponent's primary is mostly about holding objectives as well. So that's the one where I think what you're doing most takes away from what your opponent's doing. I found while playing some other dispositions that it would be like, oh, my card is telling me to do this, but me doing this scores me points, but it doesn't take away my opponent's points, right? Like priority is telling me to go hold the center and action it. But me doing so doesn't inherently deny my opponent any points. It's just letting me do my stuff. And I found that take and hold is one of those dispositions where inherently me accomplishing my goals is stopping my opponent from scoring their goals. And that's something that's actually quite valuable. So I was very excited for this. I was really happy to get out there and play, a good real tournament of 11th edition. And I'm really just excited to do more. I was very much trying this as an experimental Space Marine list, an experimental, I should say. And I think that I'll be going over to something more like Blades and trying out the priority assets and seeing how that feels next. But I had a really good time with it. And it was great to take a lot of my teammates on Team USA to a tournament, several of whom were teammates I'd never actually played on a team with. And also to go to a different part of the country. I've never played Warhammer in the state of Arizona. At some point, I would love to say that I've gone to a tournament in every state in the United States. I still have a number to knock off, but it was nice to get one more. And it was great to kick off the edition with a really well run event. I always have to tip my hat a little bit to the Green Banner crew because they run a very smooth, well organized event. And so I distinctly enjoyed that. All right. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it, enjoyed hearing some of our initial reads on the edition. Of course, if you want to support Team USA more, you can also find our podcast on YouTube and on Spotify and on Apple. So wherever you listen to it, you can find us in more places. And we do have a Patreon as well. You can find links on all of those websites. And that's just a quick way to show us support if you'd like to. If you want to support Team USA, we are gearing up towards the WTC. As a matter of fact, WTC is going to be in like 6 weeks from when I'm recording this, which is way too around the corner for me to say, I just played my first tournament game of the edition like 3 or 4 days ago, and now I have WTC in 6 weeks. So that tight turnaround is quite spooky, but I think on our next episode will be after the Team USA practice weekend, and so I expect we're going to have quite a lot to talk about. And of course, Anthony Vanilla will be back with us next week because while he did not attend the Heroes Cup, he certainly will be at practice weekend. Thanks for listening, and I will catch everyone next time. Bye-bye.